The man in the torn trousers sat outside the gate of the Mensa compound at 8:47 on a Saturday morning, and nobody looked at him twice. He had arrived on foot, carrying nothing but a cracked plastic water bottle and a gray kaftan with a tear along the left shoulder seam. He sat on the low concrete ledge beside the gate and waited. The compound was on Bourdieu Road in Lagos, and the catering vehicles had been moving in and out since 6 that morning. White tents were going up inside. Men in matching black aprons were carrying trays. Somebody's daughter was getting married today. The man on the ledge had been watching it all with the stillness of someone who had spent a long time learning not to move when moving was not necessary. What nobody standing at that gate could have known, and what would change the direction of this story entirely, was that the man in the torn kaftan was the one they were all setting up tables for. His name was Tobena Owusu Boateng, and he was 31 years old and weighed 84 kilograms and had not eaten since the previous night because eating had not been part of the plan. The plan had been his idea. His father, Chief Mensa Owusu Boateng, a man whose name appeared on the registration papers of 7 companies, 4 foundations, and a private hospital that bore the family name, had tried to talk him out of it. They had sat in the library of the family estate in East Legon 9 days earlier, across a table wide enough to lay a body on, and Chief Mensa had folded his hands on the surface and said, quietly, in the way that men who have carried weight for a long time speak, that the girl had shown herself already, that she had come from a family of reasonable standing, that she had completed her postgraduate work at the University of Ghana, that she had sat at their dinner table twice and spoken without pretension. He said all of this in the voice of a man presenting a case. Tobena had listened. Then, Tobena had said that a woman could sit at a dinner table 3 times and still not show who she was, that the table was the test she had prepared for. What he needed was a test she had not. Chief Mensa had not agreed. But he had not stopped him either. Abina Chidinma Achebe was 28 years old and had grown up in Enugu, the 3rd daughter of a civil servant who had retired on a pension of 42,000 naira a month, and a mother who sold fabric from a stall in the Ogbete market on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Abina was 5 feet 6 and wore her hair in twists she redid every 3 weeks herself, because she had learned from watching her mother that the things you could do for yourself, you did for yourself. She had a degree in accounting and a postgraduate certificate in financial management. She had worked for 4 years as a junior auditor at a firm on Lagos main island before she met Tobena at a conference in Abuja, in a room full of people trying to look important, and had said something that made him laugh for the first time that entire day. She had said it without trying to be funny. That was the thing about her that he had not been able to put down. She wore, on the morning of her wedding, a cream wrapper skirt and a cotton blouse she had pressed the previous night with a travel iron borrowed from her cousin. The blouse had cost 3,800 naira at a boutique on Osu Oxford Street, and she had bought it 2 months earlier and hung it on the door of her wardrobe and looked at it sometimes before sleeping. Not with vanity, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had worked for something small and earned it. She had a gold pin that had belonged to her grandmother, pressed into the fold of the wrapper at her hip. The pin had a small green stone in the center, and her grandmother had worn it to church for 40 years until the day she gave it to Abena at the airport in Enugu and said, without explaining further, that it was for when she needed to remember she came from people. The compound was 43 steps from the main gate to the entrance of the house. Abina had counted them on her first visit, and she still knew the number. The trees along the left side were agba trees, old and wide, and in the morning they blocked the light in a specific way that left patches of cool shadow on the stone walkway. She had noticed that too. She was the kind of person who noticed things and stored them without knowing why. Her mother called it a habit of keeping. Her father called it preparation for something he could not name yet. At 9:04 a.m., one of the catering staff let a cooler slip near the gate, and it struck the ledge where Tobena was sitting, and he did not move away from it. He looked at the young man, who was maybe 19, and said, "Take your time." That was all. The young man looked at him the way people look at strangers they are not sure how to place, gathered the cooler, and kept moving. Tobena settled back against the wall and waited. Abina came out of the main house at 9:17 with her cousin Amma, who was talking and gesturing with both hands about something that needed to be done before 10. They were walking quickly toward the side entrance where the additional dressing space had been set up in a parlor off the main wing. Abena saw the man on the ledge. She slowed by 2 steps. He was sitting straight, but his kaftan was torn, and the plastic water bottle beside him was empty and had been in the sun for a while. And she registered all of this in the time it takes a person to register facts they have been trained by life to read quickly. She stopped. Amma kept walking 3 steps before noticing and turning back. Abina said, speaking to the man but not loudly, "Good morning. Have you had water this morning?" Tobena looked up at her. He said he had not. She turned and told Amma to go inside and bring water and anything from the kitchen that was ready and could be carried. Amma opened her mouth, and Abena looked at her with an expression that contained no argument, only direction. Amma went inside. Tobena watched Abena stand there in the compound of the house where her wedding was happening, in her pressed cotton blouse, her hands folded in front of her, and he noticed that she did not fidget. She did not pull out her phone. She did not look at the entrance to see if anyone had seen her stop. She simply stood there and waited for the water to come, the way her grandmother had stood at the airport, as if the place she had stopped was the only place there was. She asked him his name. He gave her a name that was not his. He said he had been walking since before sunrise trying to find a relative's house, and he had lost his way, and his phone had no battery, and he did not know this part of Lagos well. All of this was true in its structure, if not in its particular. Abina said, "You've come a long way." Not as a question, as a recognition. Amma came back with a large bottle of cold water and a plate covered in foil that turned out to hold jollof rice and 2 pieces of fried plantain from whatever the catering team had already prepared. Amma held the plate out toward Tobena with the expression of someone performing a task that confused her. Tobena took it and said thank you. Abina told Amma to go ahead, that she would follow in a moment. Amma gave her a look that carried 6 different concerns and went inside. Abina crouched down so she was closer to eye level with the man on the ledge. Not all the way down, but enough. She said, "Do you know where your relative stays? We can call someone to come for you once the morning settles." He said he didn't want to be a problem. She said, "You're not. If this story is already sitting in your chest the way I think it is, subscribe before we go any further. Because what happens in the next hour is something Abina never saw coming, and something Tobena would spend a long time after this trying to explain. She left him at the ledge with the food and the water and went inside. What she did not know was that 2 things happened in the next 4 minutes. The first was that her elder, Mrs. Comfort Adeyemi Bright, who was 72 years old and had been the Owusu Boateng family's household manager for 21 years, was standing at the compound window on the ground floor with a cup of ginger tea in both hands, watching. Mrs. Comfort had seen things from that window for 21 years. She had seen things that couldn't be unseated from memory. She set down her tea and picked up the telephone in the hallway and dialed a number she had dialed 8 times in the last 11 years on mornings when something needed to be reported directly. The second thing that happened was that one of the bridesmaids, a woman named Sola, came through the side entrance at a quick step, saw the man on the ledge, and said, to no one in particular but loudly enough for it to carry, "Why is this man still sitting here? This is a private event. Someone needs to move him." She called for the security man near the gate and pointed, and the security man, whose name was Francis, and who had been working this gate for 3 years, and who knew, in the specific way that men in his position know things, that it was safer to comply with a woman in a lace blouse than to make a judgment call, walked toward the ledge. Tobena did not move when the security man arrived. He was still eating. He finished the last of the rice before he looked up and said, without urgency, "I'll go when I'm ready." Francis said the area was for guests only. Tobena said, "I know." Francis was trying to decide what this meant when the main door of the house opened, and Chief Mensa Owusu Boateng walked out in his full ceremonial agbada. Cream and gold, with his reading glasses still on from whatever he had been doing inside, and saw his son sitting on the ledge beside the gate in a torn kaftan with an empty plate on his knees. Chief Mensa removed his glasses. He was a man who had learned to manage his expressions across 68 years of being watched by people who wanted to read something into them. His face remained exactly as it had been. He said, "Francis, go back to the gate." Francis went back to the gate. Chief Mensa walked to where his son was sitting, which was a walk of approximately 9 paces, and he stood there and he said nothing for 4 seconds. Then he said, "And what have you learned?" Tobena looked down at the plate. He said, "Give me an hour." Chief Mensa looked at the empty plate. He picked it up and walked back into the house, still carrying it. He did not look back. By 11:03 a.m., Tobena had gone around the compound through a rear entrance he had arranged with Mrs. Comfort the week before, cleaned up in the side guest room, and put on the agbada that had been pressed, and waiting on the wooden hanger behind the door. He came into the main hall at 11:22. He did not make an announcement. He simply walked in. The hall was arranged with 164 chairs, and most of them were full. The officiant was at the front. The orchestra was warming. There were people in this room who had known him since childhood, and they saw him, and the room adjusted slightly, the way rooms do when they have been waiting for something to arrive. Abina was standing in the entrance corridor waiting to be walked in. She saw him come through the side door in the cream agbada, and she looked at him with the expression of someone assembling information that had arrived out of order and was now falling into a sequence that made sense. She looked at the agbada. She looked at his hands. She looked at his face. Her own face did not change. He stood in front of her, and she stood in front of him, and between them was everything that had happened that morning, and neither of them spoke for a moment. Then she said, "The torn kaftan." He said, "Yes." She said, "How long were you sitting there?" He said, "Since 8:47. She looked at him with an expression that was not anger and was not surprise, and was not even the kind of warmth that is performed for a watching room. It was something quieter and more personal than any of those things. She said, "You should have had water by 7. That was too long to wait in this heat." Tobena was still for a moment. Then he said, "Mrs. Comfort told me to time it so you'd be coming out around 9. Abina's chin came up slightly. Mrs. Comfort knew. He said, "Mrs. Comfort knows everything." And from the window of the ground floor hallway, where she was now standing with a fresh cup of ginger tea, Mrs. Comfort Adeyemi Bright, who was 72 years old and had worked for this family for 21 years, and who had picked up that telephone not to report what she saw, but to call Chief Mensa directly and say, she stopped. She came back with food. She stayed. Mrs. Comfort was looking at the two of them standing in the corridor in the moments before they walked into the room that held all the people who had come to see what kind of woman this was. And she took a long sip of tea and did not go any closer. She had seen enough. The ceremony was at 11:45. The officiant said the words that get said. The room held the quiet it holds when something real is happening, and the people inside it know it. Abina stood straight through all of it. She did not grip Tobena's hand during the formal portions, only rested hers inside his. The gold pin with the green stone was at her hip, pressed into the fold of the cream wrapper where it had been since morning. Tobena's father sat in the front row, and at one point during the exchange he looked at the empty chair beside him where his late wife would have sat and was still for several seconds, and then he looked back at the couple at the front of the room, and something in his posture shifted, not outwardly, but in the way that a man who has been holding a thing for a long time puts it down. After the ceremony, at the reception that ran until past 6 in the evening, a man named Dubem Okafor, who had gone to university with Tobena and had been watching the events of the morning from a distance, pulled Tobena aside near the palm wine station and said, "I heard she gave food to a man at the gate this morning. Was that you?" Tobena said nothing. Dubem laughed and shook his head and said, "You always went about things the long way." Tobena said, "That's the only way I know." Sola, the bridesmaid who had called for the security man in the morning, found out what had happened when a relative told her near the end of the evening. She went quiet for a long time. Then she said she had only been trying to make sure the compound was organized. Nobody disagreed with her out loud. At 7:22 that evening, Tobena found Abena near the agba trees on the left side of the walkway, away from the catering tables and the orchestra, which was now playing something slow. She was standing with her heels off, holding them in one hand, her feet on the stone path. She had been this way, he would learn over the following years, when she had been on her feet for too long and had stopped performing standing up. Just standing, resting in plain view, without apology. He came and stood beside her. She said, "You wanted to know if I'd see past what someone looked like." He said yes. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What would you have done if I hadn't stopped?" He had thought about this. He had thought about it sitting on the ledge at 8:47 and at 9:04 when the cooler struck the wall, and during the 4 minutes between when she went inside and when Mrs. Comfort picked up the telephone. He said, "I don't know. I hadn't built that part yet." She looked at him. "That's an honest answer." He said, "I'm trying to be." She put her heels back on, one at a time, with the practiced ease of a person who has worn heels for long occasions and learned that putting them on is easier than carrying them home. Then she said, "You could have just asked me." He said, "I know." She looked at the agba trees. "Don't do things like that again." He said, "I won't." She took his hand and they walked back toward the lights. There is a belief, in many homes where the old knowledge has been kept, that character is not what a person shows in the rooms they prepared for. It is what they do in the 30 seconds, when nobody told them they were being watched. Tobena Owusu Boateng had 31 years of money and name and education, and he was trying to find out what the woman beside him was made of at her core. Beneath the postgraduate certificate and the pressed blouse and the carefully chosen words, what he found was someone who stopped when stopping was inconvenient, who brought food when the food was needed, who sent the other person away so she could stay herself, and who, when she learned the truth, said, "You should have had water by 7. That was too long to wait in the heat." She did not say, "How dare you?" She said, "You should have had water." Because the man on the ledge was the thing in front of her, and the man on the ledge was thirsty, and that was the entire conversation. You cannot manufacture that. You can dress for it. You can prepare answers. But when the door opens unexpectedly, only one thing comes through: what you actually are. The people who know this are not always the ones the room is watching. They are often the ones who stop at gates, who put food on plates without being asked, who keep gold pins from grandmothers in the fold of a wrapper because someone told them at an airport, "This is for when you need to remember where you came from." Those people carry the world's moral weight in the quietest ways, and they rarely get acknowledged for it until the moment when someone is looking specifically for it and finds it, precisely where it was always kept. Here is the question I want to leave with you. If someone you loved arranged a test for you on the day of your wedding, not to trick you, but because they genuinely needed to know who you were before they committed their entire life to you, would you be angry, or would you understand? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to read what you think. If this kind of story is the story you come here for, the ones about quiet strength, about the people the world overlooks, about what happens when character is tested where nobody is recording, subscribe. This channel exists because those stories deserve to be told, and they deserve to be told right. I'll see you in the next one.